All right, welcome into episode 10 of the DAV Podcast. Dan Klaskins and Ashley Burns back with you, and happy to be here. Today we are going to take a deep dive into navigating through a changing economy, looking at what's going on with COVID-19 and the pandemic and how it's impacting our nation's economy, the unemployment rates, and specifically with veterans. And as always, here to talk to me about these issues and many more, it's my co-host, Ashley Burns. Ashley, great to be back with you. It's been a while, and hope everything's going well with you and your family, and it's definitely been some interesting times.
Yeah. I mean, we're staying safe. We're staying socially distant. We're trying all the things that are recommended. So, we've been good so far, and I certainly hope all of our listeners are as well. But yeah, lots to get into, and we know that there are so many things about this entire pandemic that are impacting people across the country, but the veterans population specifically, there are some concerns about health concerns and potentially veterans being more susceptible to COVID and just some other things that I think are particularly interesting to our audience, things that as a veteran, you'll want to know.
No doubt about it. And it's been a really trying few months here for many Americans. And here at DAV, we've certainly done our best to keep our programs and services up and running to veterans. Some of that has gone virtual, but as always, you can visit DAV.org there and find all the help you need in your area. And also, if you want to help us help veterans, and we've definitely done that through our COVID-19 Unemployment Relief Fund earlier this year, helping thousands of veterans when they were in the time of need. And Ashley, looking here essentially at what's going on with the employment force, the job force. Of course, all of our virtual job fairs are still going on at jobs.dav.org. A lot of our on-site events with Recruit Military obviously have been postponed or canceled this year due to those crowds, but we're having a lot of people come to these virtual job fairs and a lot of opportunities out there for veterans to find employment.
Yeah. So, here we are several months into this pandemic, and I can say for sure, I don't know if I would have imagined that this is where we'd be back in March, but this has become our new normal until such time as it's safe to try and get back out to the lives that we were all living before this unfolded. And as you said, it's meant a period of isolation and job loss and financial instability and just a lot of uncertainty for people. In a lot of cases for veterans, disabled veterans, who are just trying to do the best they can to get through this. And to give a little bit of guidance and really open up that conversation about money and finances, which is not always a comfortable topic for people to talk about, DAV teamed up virtually, of course, with CNBC and Acorns to present the Path Forward, a financial town hall for America's veterans. And so, it brought together experts and veterans themselves to talk about financial health and small business ownership, things like buying a home and the cost of caregiving, and even new ways for older adults to save and invest in really difficult, trying financial times. So it's a lot of great information we're bringing to you here. And so our listeners are aware you can also view the entire town hall on our website by visiting dav.la/pathforward. So without further ado, let's take a listen.
Jim Sursley is an Army combat veteran. He served in Vietnam and lost both of his legs and an arm after stepping on a landmine. He's been involved with DAV for the past, are you ready for this, 52 years. He's joining us today from Apopka, Florida. Great to see you today. I know you have a question for Colonel Gadsden here, Jim.
I do, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. Colonel Gadsden, my question is this: with all the uncertainty surrounding so many aspects of our veterans' lives, what are some coping strategies that would help our veterans deal with the unpredictable nature, both financially and health-wise, in their lives?
Well, Jim, first of all, thank you for your question and thank you for your service. Our injuries are not too far apart, as I can see. For me, I think veterans, we just really need to call upon our experiences of being in the military. For me, the most important thing is just staying in the present, you can't get ahead of yourself, and you can't really hold on to the past. And so focusing on the things that you can control versus the things that you can't are the skills that I continue to live every day. I've been fortunate and been able to work out and just focus on my personal health during this COVID period. And I'm proud to say I've lost about 30 pounds. So, and that's just focusing on the moment. Thank you.
Colonel Gatson, you do not need to rub in your weight loss to the rest of us who cannot stay the same. Army veteran CC Mazik from South Carolina was paralyzed after a parachuting accident while training for combat in Iraq. She has a question for Tara about the security of her benefits as she has a son heading off to college. So congratulations on that, CC. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my question is, as a disabled veteran in the current state of our country and a mother of a son who just graduated high school on Monday and about to attend college in the next couple of months, what type of assurances will I and other disabled veterans have that the benefits that we currently are afforded will not be delayed or decreased because of COVID-19?
Thank you for that question, Cece, and thank you for your service. And also congratulations to Tristan for graduating. That's an incredible accomplishment. I did a little digging, and there has been one time recently in 2019 where some IT or tech issues did delay some payments to some veterans for a couple of days. However, per the coronavirus specific FAQ page on the Veterans Affairs website, they said that they are currently processing all benefits on time. They've also paused some of the larger initiatives that they have. I'm sure you've heard about it, the switch to electronic health records, thank goodness, and have said that their priority is really taking care of their veterans at this time. As for education payments, if Tristan is planning to use, I'm not sure, is planning to use your GI Bill benefit to pay for his education, okay. But either way, you should really be keeping on top of what the school is planning to do for the fall. You know, how you're going to make those payments and what that's going to look like for you is going to depend on whether the school decides to go with online classes or if they temporarily close campus. So really keep on top of those things. And then really either way, a couple of things that you can do to be proactively to protect yourself from any delayed in payments would be to make sure that your direct deposit and tuition payment information is up to date and accurate. And then also, if you can establish a little bit of cash cushion that can kind of bridge the gap between any potential payment issues, that's going to give you a lot more peace of mind in the event that something does happen with your disability payments.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, EC.
And Commander Whitehead, on any given day, DAV represents more than 200,000 claims for benefits. Do you want to weigh in here?
I sure do. And, you know, every year, you know, the budget's always a big concern every year. You know, I'll say this, that right now we're not hearing any changes coming to the budget, but it's a cyclical thing. Every year, you never know what's going to come up. And I'll tell you, our team is constantly monitoring that. And if we do hear anything that's going to affect our benefits, we get that out to our members right away, because it's all about the number of voices that are out there and how we can make a difference. So those that are actually listening to this, you know, to stay on top of it and to help us protect our benefits, if those can sign up, if you're not part of our Commanders Action Network, I encourage you to go to our Commanders Action Network and be part of it. You don't need to be a member to be part of it, but sign up so you can be on top of it to help get our voices heard out there.
Derek Goodwin is a 12-year Marine Corps veteran from Massachusetts. He's curious about buying a home. Derek, go ahead.
Hi guys, thanks for having me, Contessa, and we got 2 Marines before me, so Semper Fi, the 3rd Marine in a row. I kind of like this trend. So my advice is, or my question is, what advice should you give to veterans, disabled American veterans, looking to purchase a home the next 24 to 30 months? And really, is this going to be a good time to buy?
Thank you, Derek, for that question and for your service. With rates at historic lows and home prices having increased so much since the recession, a lot of people are asking themselves that same question. But the question really to me is not, is this a good time to buy in general, but really, is this a good time for me to buy, or in this case, for you to buy? So some questions you should really ask yourself to figure that out is, 1, are you currently in a healthy financial position? Do you have a cash cushion, cash reserves, an emergency fund like I was just talking about? If not, I would really start there. do you have a stable, reliable income in this post-COVID world? Everything has changed. What you thought was stable may not be going forward. And then what are your real intentions for owning a home? Is this something that you view as an investment, or is it kind of, as a lot of my friends feel, just sort of pressured to do so, like I should be doing this right now? And then finally, how long do you plan to live in the home? So the mortgage market is really not very friendly to short-term homeowners because transaction costs are so high. So, you either have to prepare to potentially sell at a loss or become a landlord if you only plan to live there for a couple of years. Some very specific advice, just two things. Beware of online calculators. So many of them just do not include costs like taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance, or even HOA fees into their calculation. So they make it seem as though you can afford more home than you actually can. And then finally, if you're using the VA loan to get this mortgage, one of the things that you kind of can think about is whether or not you should or should not put a down payment down. Most people view the VA as, oh, it's so wonderful, I don't have to put any money down. However, if you put 5 to 10% down, it actually can change the VA funding fee that you have to pay for that rolls into your mortgage. So an example of that would be if it's not your first time using the VA loan and you put 5% down, you can actually decrease your VA home funding fee from 3.6% to 1.6%. So you can save yourself 2% on that side by putting some money down. So that's another thing I would be thinking about.
Thank you very much, Derek, for weighing in. One thing that I learned when my sister was serving in the Navy is that when someone enlists in the armed forces, it's not just that person going into service. It requires the entire family enlisting as well. So for instance, I was helping my sister when she was newly stationed in Bremerton and due to have her first baby, and her husband got deployed, and then she got put on deployment orders. And so I got called into service, and multiple times through her 12-year career, I had my niece with me. I know that caregivers play an essential role in the lives of disabled veterans. And Yvonne Riley in Alabama has been her husband Dave's caregiver for more than 20 years now. Dave served in the Coast Guard for 17 years as a helicopter rescue swimmer, and he lost all of his limbs after contracting a bacterial infection. Yvonne, I know that you are crucial to him and his life and crucial to running the home. I know you have a question for Tara about managing on a limited income.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm one of many caretakers that have gave up their careers to stay at home, take care of their veterans. And I've been out of the workforce for many years. So what advice would you have for someone that's relying on their investments and their IRA and they've declined?
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Dave, for your service, and also spouse to spouse. Yvonne, I just want to say thank you for all that I know that you have sacrificed to support your husband during and after his service. This is definitely a trying time for a lot of people. I think that, the best thing you can do is be as proactive as you can possibly be. And that really starts with sitting down, facing your finances, with a lot of us are very uncomfortable doing, but analyze your finances and try to create a plan as best you can, utilizing the benefits that you are afforded. That means controlling your cash flow is going to be key, because there's really not much room for error when you're working on a limited budget. And then also something that I'm sharing with a lot of people who have found themselves, let go of or unemployed during this time, is to really consider leveraging your unique skills to get creative, to earn an income. With technology these days, there's so many different ways that you can do that. And I think that you, Yvonne, are so valuable. You are a wealth of knowledge, of information that you have accumulated about being a caregiver over the last 20 years, that I bet there is some way that you could use that information to generate income, whether that is by creating some kind of online course or an ebook or a physical book for other people who are in your situation that need to learn how to do this, or even to be paid to speak on webinars or stages or in your local area about how you get by, how you manage, and how you make the most of the situation. I would imagine people would be very interested in hiring you to help other people do that. So that would be my suggestion, is to really try to get creative and figure out how you can use your value, because you have so much of it, to help others in this situation.
One more thing, Dave and Yvonne told me the other day that they're just about 4 years away from retirement, and that they really have been relying on investment income to supplement disability. And Tara, you told me that people who have less than 10 years left before retirement Need to get out their buckets. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, so there are lots of different ways to prepare for retirement when you're kind of in the 5 to 10 year frame out. One of the methods that I really like is to think about your money in buckets, because sometimes looking at your entire account seems a little overwhelming. So rather than doing that, let's think about it kind of in chunks. So if you're thinking about retiring in the next 4 to 5 years, you want to make sure that you have money and liquidity to do so when you want to do it. You don't want to rely on market timing to actually enter into retirement. So the first bucket you can think about creating is kind of a short-term low risk bucket of cash and short-term bonds for like those first 1 to 2 years into retirement. Then the next chunk of money is kind of a medium risk bucket of maybe some higher quality equities and bonds that can be for the next 5 to 10 years. And then the third bucket will be, your higher risk bucket that you're going to allow to compound for years to come into your later stages of retirement. And the idea being that these buckets, the later buckets, continue feeding the earlier buckets. So once you've depleted that first lower risk bucket, the second medium risk bucket kind of starts to overflow into it, and that will help you generate a more stable retirement income.
Tara, thank you. I have my own bucket for a rainy day in case the roof starts leaking. So, lots of buckets around here. So Navy veteran Tim Rorda from Colorado spent his time in service flying pointy-nosed airplanes off ships, including the USS Independence, the USS Constellation, and USS Lexington. He has a question for Colonel Gadsden about persevering through the recent downturn. Tim?
Greetings, Colonel, from Colorado on this fine spring day. My question is, what are the most salient lessons from history to apply to this financial downturn? And based on that, what course of action would you recommend going forward?
Well, Tim, first of all, thank you for your service and thank you for your question. I would like to just really kind of, I would focus on what Tara's advice has been, and that's the history of savings. The savings habits are what prepare us for the rainy days, and having immediate or short-term savings for emergencies, and having some cash and for bigger and more challenging things. What we do as Americans, I think Tara would echo, is that a lot of times we get ourselves overextended with credit, and so you don't want to. You want to participate in the credit market because that keeps your credit rating accurate, and that you're participating in the financial system. But at the same time, overextending ourselves is a lesson that we continue to learn time and time again. And so savings, not getting ourselves overextended, are, I think, the most salient lessons from history. And all I can say from an advice perspective is one that my dad taught me a long time ago, is pay yourself first. So I think at a minimum, you should always take 10% off the top and forget about it.
Tim, thank you so much for the question. Colonel, thank you for the answer as well. All right, Lisa Todero served in the Air Force for 20 years, was deployed as part of Operation Desert Storm, and then served another tour in Kuwait and Iraq. And Tara, she wants to develop a better financial plan. Lisa?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Contessa and the panel. Appreciate you taking the time to help veterans out. My question is, like most veterans, I would like to develop a better financial plan. My retirement fund was spent on college tuition for my son to attend SCAD. I barely have $1,500 available loose income. My credit score is on a constant roller coaster ride. What can I do now to invest in and prepare for having a living income, since my retirement goal is currently unachievable? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for your service. And thank you so much for that question. I really want to acknowledge you for sharing that information and for posing this question, because in conversations I've had with many people, there are a lot of people who are in the same boat, but they're kind of afraid to raise their hand and ask for help because they, feel a little guilty for having spent their retirement on, education, and now they're kind of in this situation. So I really do want to acknowledge you for sharing that information here. And secondly, I want to reassure you that retirement might not look the way that you thought it would, or be able to happen exactly when you wished it would, but that is still possible to retire at some point in the future, but it's going to require that you take action today. So first of all, we've talked about this a lot in this call already. Make sure that you prioritize beefing up that emergency fund. So trying to get more cash on hand that you can have, should these unexpected things come up. That's going to really help you stabilize your credit, because what happens is people get into this vicious cycle of credit cards and trying to pay them down and building up credit balances because they don't have emergency funds on hand when, life's unexpected things kind of get them in the face. So really focus on building up as much cash reserves as you can, and then put something away for retirement. It can be, no matter how small, it doesn't matter, in either a tax advantaged account like an IRA, or if you don't qualify for an IRA because of earned income issues, a taxable brokerage account. So to free up cash for that, you can look for expenses that you can cut. Nobody likes when I mention this, but one of the most obvious places to look for expenses to cut is actually in your garage. People spend far too much money on car loans and cars in general, and sometimes just getting rid of that expensive car note and buying something that's a little more affordable and easier to pay for can help you free up some cash on a monthly basis. And I know it's not what you want to hear, but one of the kind of things that you can do as a last resort is to push off retirement for a couple of years. Those, extra couple of years can actually make a really big difference when it comes to your savings capacity and your investment earnings over time. So again, just to reiterate, the most important thing you can do though is do something, take action, no matter how small, today, and you'll get there.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Andres Vega from Queens, New York, also was in the Army during the Vietnam War from 1970 to 1972 and used the GI Bill to become an accountant. He has a question for Tara about investing. Andres.
I want to thank DAV, CNBC, and Comcast for selecting my question for this virtual town hall. I'm a 69-year-old veteran, and currently my only income is Social Security and disability from the VA. What are some new ideas I can use to save and invest at this point in my life? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andres, for that question and for your service as well. This is an interesting time. A lot of people, when they get to kind of their later 60s or early 70s, think that time is gone and they can't possibly do anything more, and that it's too late to save or invest anything for retirement. But that's not really true. We as Americans, thanks to advances in healthcare, are living much longer and longer. So you may have decades ahead of you that can still be bright years that you can save and invest for. So some things that you can do. We've talked a lot about an emergency fund. So if you haven't established one of those, or even if you have, consider switching that into what's called a high yield savings account to make sure you are at least getting as much of an interest rate or return on that cash as you possibly can during this time. That way it's not being eroded by inflation. Another thing that you can do is try to think of ways to proactively lower your expenses in retirement. That revolves around things like housing. Maybe can you downsize? Can you, move somewhere else that is a lower cost of living? Can you save on taxes by switching to a different location? How might you be able to lower your medical expenses or future medical expenses with potential insurance policies? Maybe like a long-term care insurance policy is something that you could explore as well. And then from an investing perspective, if you're only sources of income are Social Security and disability, you don't have what the IRS considers earned income, so you don't really you're not eligible for a tax advantaged retirement account like an IRA, for example. So where you're going to have to invest, right? That's always people's questions. Like, I want to invest, where do I start? Is going to be probably in a taxable brokerage account. That may be your only option. I would look into that for sure, but that based on what you've told me here, that is what I gather. So in a taxable brokerage account, also called a personal account, that might be the only investment vehicle available to you. And then when it comes to actually filling that account with with investments, it depends on what you want that money to be for. So is this money, is this going to be for you in the future to save and invest and then withdraw from, or is it possibly something that you might want to leave to family members after you're gone? In either case, the way that you will allocate that portfolio will be very different. But in both cases, one of the things I always recommend is that you're looking for investment funds that are low fee, that have low expense ratios. And the reason for that is because the less you have to pay someone, the more of the return you can actually keep for yourself. So just be wary of what you're investing in, how much they charge, and that will be a good place to start.
That was a great amount of information and plenty more. Jobs.dav.org, of course, the resource page there. And we are diving deeper into this issue of employment. And if this is the first time you've listened to the DAV podcast, we have a ton of other episodes already out there. We're going to be coming out with many more. So you want to subscribe to it. A number of ways you can do so, including iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, among others. You can also get us on Google Play, and anytime. DAV.org/podcast is the place to do it. Up next, as we look at our nation's economy and unemployment rates and how they've just been turned upside down as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, DAV's National Employment Director, Jeff Hall, he recently sat down with Hiring America, the first TV series dedicated to helping veterans find jobs, and offered up some helpful tips for veterans searching for employment and trying to wade through these uncharted waters.
The COVID-19 virus has greatly affected the lives of people all over the world and presented Americans and their families with many new and difficult challenges. To help support our veterans and their loved ones during this trying time, Hiring America is speaking with experts and organizations around the country to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the veteran community and provide tips on how to navigate the current crisis. This week, we're speaking with Jeff Hall, National Employment Director for DAV, a nonprofit charity that provides support for disabled American veterans and their families. Jeff, thanks for taking a moment to speak with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
How has the current crisis affected operations at DAV and the community you serve?
The DAV has been around since 1920, so we're no stranger to certainly being there in a time of crisis. We've been there in the aftermath of every war since World War I. And we've been providing free services to veterans and their families in a host of ways, providing benefits assistance, transportation to and from medical appointments, being their voice on Capitol Hill, and of course, employment assistance that we are able to provide. It was a quick pivot that we had to do in a host of ways, but we're still there. We're still providing the services and assistance that we do.
So tell us specifically how you are still doing that. Everything virtual?
Pretty much, yeah. For instance, I know that it was a big question in the beginning of how veterans and their families were going to get that much needed benefits assistance when our offices had to close temporarily due to social distancing requirements. But we were able to, thank goodness, through the age of technology, we were able to have all of those folks being remote and still being able to provide that much needed claims assistance, whether it's still gathering evidence to support a claim or submitting the claim or an appeal. We're still doing that via email, via telephone calls, a lot of ways that we can do that. With our employment program, we do 140 career fairs as an example per year. Some of those are already in the virtual mode. Back in March, we had to do a quick pivot to go from the physical job fair scene to a completely virtual job fair scene. However, we already had things in place and we were able to quickly pivot and convert all of our physical job fairs to virtual job fairs, which we've done.
What does a virtual job fair look like?
What an individual can expect is when they enter into the job fair, the virtual job fair, all the companies are listed to include DAV. They simply click on the company they want to visit and they'll enter into a public chat space. If that you want to go deeper with a conversation with the company, you simply, invite the company, or the company will invite you to a private chat, and then you can have a much more discreet or a one-on-one that's away from the public chat room.
Jeff, tell me more about DAV's COVID-19 unemployment relief. What is it?
DAV, again, we've always been there in the time of crisis. Again, whether it was a natural disaster or helping people reassemble their lives after war, DAV has always been there. And so what we did was we quickly gathered and put forth the plan and launched the DAV COVID Relief Unemployment Program. Essentially, what that means is for service-connected disabled veterans who have lost their employment, they can apply for a one-time grant of $250, one per household, that it would allow some financial assistance to help them in these very, very trying times. So we set that up. We set up a special section in our website. It's at dav.org/COVID, COVID. And whether it's a veteran that wants to apply for the grant, that individual is going to need to supply some documentation to support their claim, i.e. something from the Department of Veterans Affairs that verifies that they have a service-related disability, as well as something from their employer that they have lost their employment due to that.
What advice do you have for our disabled veterans and their loved ones during this crisis?
When it comes to a situation like this that we're all going through, when it comes to isolation, feelings of isolation, it can be difficult itself for all of us to deal with, to get used to not leaving your house, not leaving your cul-de-sac or whatever it may be. But for veterans, especially disabled veterans, who already went through feelings of feeling alone or being alone, or those feelings of isolation through their transition process, this is just, it can compound the whole situation. So for those individuals, I hope they reach out to an organization like DAV, because we can provide guidance, help, or maybe just be an ear to talk to. On the other hand, for others out there, they might want to do what we call a buddy check and simply look in on somebody and say, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? Something like that. So staying in touch, staying in contact with one another, and really just looking out for each other is what it's all about.
Jeff, how can people find out more about DAV and its support programs?
To learn more about DAV and the many programs and services that we have, or to get involved by volunteering, you can go to dav.org to learn more and to stay in tune with everything that we've been doing for veterans and their families for the past 100 years.
Thank you for joining us on Hiring America, Jeff.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, so Dan, as you could hear from Jeff, despite these shifting unemployment numbers, we're going up, we're going down, back up, there are employers out there right now that are looking to hire veterans. So that's a bright spot for veterans looking for work, and DAV's virtual job fairs really are a great place to connect with those that are looking to hire veterans right now. And while we're talking about employment and financial stability during uncertain times, like during a pandemic, one surprising roadblock for some veterans that might not think about is actually access to banking. In fact, there's roughly 250,000 veterans and beneficiaries who may not have a bank account and receive their VA benefits the old-fashioned way, either through a prepaid debit card or through a paper check. But with any kind of paper trail like that, or things that come through the mail, that can open the door to fraud, as we've seen in a lot of cases. And so DAV's Matt Saint-Sing spoke with VA's Undersecretary for Benefits, Dr. Paul Lawrence, as well as a few other experts from AMBA, Association of Military Banks of America, to take a look at what the VA is doing right now to help improve financial literacy and also to help veterans develop a long-term financial strategy.
Yeah, so I became familiar with this new program in the last few days, and it definitely looks like a lot of veterans could take advantage of this, and it really helps a need. But I'm kind of curious who the program is aimed for. Is there a specific demographic that the designers had in mind when coming up with this new tool?
I'll let Joe answer this, because I think no, right? It's mostly aimed at veterans who are unbanked, right, who receive their benefits via check or a debit card. Now, you once would have thought that perhaps these are homeless veterans or something like that, but I think it goes across the demographic spectrum, right, Joe? I mean, it really is not intuitive as to who these folks are.
No, that's correct. I think the original intent was for we would call them unbanked, and as Dr. Lawrence said, it's the prepaid cards and checks. But in terms of demographics and who they are, these folks are in all 50 states in the U.S., male, female veterans. And again, it was geared towards that, but also any veteran who, if they're even unhappy with their current banking situation and may be banked, they can also participate or explore this program. Because we have 8 banks on board, it gives them options to choose and pick what would suit them best.
Being unbanked or getting a paper check in the mail, comes with a lot of risks, and this seems like a way to kind of counteract some potential scammers. And I don't need to tell anyone on the line here that veterans are a prime target for people to try to scam.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And so here's where I want the AMBA folks to jump in. Our vision was not just dealing immediately with the sort of things you point out of cashing a check and all the fees and the things, the shenanigans, but getting folks exposed to like the in the United States and the many benefits it brings. So I know, Steve, you've talked to me about all the financial literacy and the financial tools and products that one could avail themselves once you get banked.
Right. So the banks that are currently participating in the program are all banks that are members of our organization, but more importantly, these are banks that have deep experience in the military and veteran communities. They are all banks that have at least one branch on a military installation right now. And so they've got a lot of background in dealing with the unique financial challenges that military families and veterans and their families face. And you mentioned one of those challenges, which is susceptibility to fraud. Last year, we did a study with the Better Business Bureau Institute and actually quantified that challenge by talking about how the veteran and military communities were susceptible in specific areas to people who try to take advantage of them. And our banks understand that and can help their customers deal with those challenges. And as Dr. Lawrence said, unlike veterans who get their benefits on prepaid cards or paper checks, folks who have bank accounts can avail themselves of savings accounts, allowing them to save money, which is something that you can't really do effectively on a prepaid card or with paper checks. You have access to credit. The fee structure on a checking account for someone who brings a direct deposit in, which our veterans would do, there are no fees attached to these accounts that these banks are offering. No fees. Obviously, if somebody bounces a check or something, there are penalties. But when you compare that to a prepaid card, where you get one free withdrawal a month, that's pretty significant in the long run for a veteran who may be living from paycheck to paycheck. So the advantages, which we try to point out on the website for dealing with banks vis-a-vis prepaid cards and paper checks, are considerable.
And I assume if a veteran gets one of these bank accounts, they can walk into to whichever branch or any branch of whichever bank that they're with and be able to take advantage, and the people there are going to be trained and know what they're talking about with these accounts.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
So one of the things, this is Joe Gurney, one of the things I would mention, which was one of the reasons why we also went in this direction of starting this program, was to give veterans the opportunity to bank in person. With a prepaid card or check, they don't have the opportunity to bank in person if they need to do it and want to do it. So one of the advantages with all the branches the banks that we have in our program is their banking locations and the ability to bank in person.
What if a veteran is married, or what if they're a married veteran couple? Is a joint banking account possible, or how would that work?
This is Steve again. Absolutely. Not only married couples, but in some cases, veterans who have caretakers. A personal example of a situation where I have personally experienced that latter part is my wife basically manages the finances of her mom. Her mom lives in Utah. We live in Florida. And before we moved her account to a bank that had branches in both Florida and Utah, we were faced with having to deal on the phone with the bank that my mother-in-law was dealing with in Utah, which was, quite frankly, a nightmare. So after we resolved the fraud that had been perpetrated against her and we closed her account. We opened an account at a bank with branches both in Florida and in Utah. It's made a world of difference. My wife can now manage my mother-in-law's finances. She can detect any unusual occurrences in her account. She can have a conversation with her mom about those unusual occurrences. And it has just made life much, much easier for her, and it has reduced the likelihood of having fraud committed by having two sets of eyes on the account. So those are examples of areas where a joint account is not only possible, but in some cases advisable. We're a trade association.
Okay.
We celebrated our 60th anniversary last year. We were formed by bankers who had a common bond in providing financial services to the military, most of which is actually on military installations. So, like I said, we've got banks out there that have more than 60 years of service to the military. I think our oldest one is Armed Forces Bank, which succeeded to the Army National Bank Charter, which was issued in 1907 by the Treasury Department on Fort Leavenworth. So these are banks that have a lot of experience, and the organization was created to provide a liaison between them and the other nonprofits that work in the military and veteran space, as well as the federal government.
But I think, Matt, maybe where you're going is, can others join the program? And the answer is yes. And Steve's group, AMBA, just facilitates this and arranges that. So it's not designed to be exclusive at all. Or stated more positively, more banks are welcome. No one is less of a person if more join.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would say banks or credit unions in this case as well. So not to just exclude credit unions, but bank or credit union, if wanted to join, can join.
Specifically, do we know what kind of tools and services will we be able to veterans? And I'm kind of harking on the advantages of these banks have dealing with military and veterans. What kind of services can a veteran expect if they open up an account that may be exclusive to them?
You know, they'll have access to people who understand the unique financial challenges that military and veterans have, to include access to credit. And you know, one of the big challenges that our younger military troops have, and many of our veterans are in the same financial position as many of them, is access to credit. If they are truly living from paycheck to paycheck, and they have a crisis that basically prevents them from actually making it through that last week, a flat tire or something like that, they can go to apply for credit at their bank. Hopefully, those life crises won't happen until they've actually saved a little bit of money. Again, something that's not really possible under the prepaid card program, and they'll be able to have the financial resiliency that they will have built themselves. But if they can't, access to credit is something that is available to them.
And Matt, this is Paul. I think your question is a little bit of the cart before the horse. Okay. So I think it's a good question, and you're right. It'd be great if there were a whole series of military or veteran-only things, but I think what we came at was sort of just what they needed, right? So let's go back to the very beginning, right? A bank that you could have access to quickly, in person or on the phone, and that was not available. A card that if you wanted a debit card had the super double secret chips and security and the like, and understanding of the local kind of, fraud things that were going on. So we were really going back to the basics first, because we felt that's what the unbanked folks didn't have. As Steve pointed out, a fee structure that wasn't designed to take advantage of the person who had the card, right? So that's really where we began. How they build on that by establishing the relationship with the bank and finding out what's available to them as a veteran or however much, that's the next part of the journey, which I hope they take advantage of. But quite frankly, when we heard stories about the fee structure, the cards and the susceptibility to the things you were asking about, that's really where we began.
Okay.
So, and Matt, this is Joe. One thing I'll mention, going back to the original issue we were facing, is some of the veterans who have the prepaid cards, and checks, they're withdrawing their money within the first 3 days of receiving their deposit. So in this case, they're either holding on to cash or holding on to their money immediately as it's put on a prepaid card. And what we wanted to, change in that was to give fraud protection and not to feel like they had to withdraw that money in the first 3 days. But not only that, but keep it on there. And should they want to actually add money on that account, they can, which is none of these prepaid cards can do, and/or a check. The other thing is just on the check side. I mean, the check cashing places that charge enormous fees.
Yeah.
We wanted to do that because some of these folks are not getting, honestly, that much money, and to give a portion of it away just to cash a check, we wanted to stop it.
Wow, what a great amount of information we've been able to share with you here today. Always appreciate you listening, and plenty more ahead on some future podcasts. But Ashley, we hope that the unemployment rate goes down and that the economy starts getting back on track. But it's nice to know, while things are still moving all over the place, that there's a lot of resources out there. Jobs.dav.org is a place where we've got a lot of information. And right now, I think people just need to take any help they can get, those that need the help.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, while you're checking out DAV's career resources, that DAV also, as Jeff Hall had mentioned, that there are emergency financial relief aid grants available for disabled veterans out there who have lost employment or income due to the pandemic. So, be sure to check out our website. If you're struggling, if you're looking for work, these are all resources that can be very valuable at a time like this.
DAV.org/COVID, by the way, is the page to go for all of those resources around the pandemic. And really, we couldn't do any of it without the support of our generous donors who've been really so good to us during these trying times and allowed us to help these veterans. So if you want to help us help veterans, you can go there, donate as well, and be sure to stick up to all the latest news with DAV by following us across our social media on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. Ashley, before we get out of here, we've got some exciting things ahead to tell our listeners about.
Yes, definitely. So, as you know, we're talking about COVID. The outbreak, unfortunately, has necessitated the cancellation of our national convention in August, which we're all very sad about. We love to see our members. We were supposed to be out in Dallas this year. It's supposed to be a really big event. So we're all a little disappointed that we won't be able to celebrate in person. But we do feel like it's still very important that we give kudos to our top honorees and award winners this year. So if you have a chance, I would highly encourage you to check out DAV's website. We're going to be hosting our first and hopefully last and only DAV and Auxiliary Virtual Salute, where we'll hear from some special guests. We'll take a look back at the first part of the year and back into last part of the year. Look at what DAV's done and accomplished, and then really drive home that we want to honor those who have given so much to veterans, our volunteers, our members, and really honor them as best as we can while we're all still socially distanced. And of course, upcoming, we've been talking about it for a while on the podcast, our centennial. And we're definitely going to be talking about some of that, some of what we've accomplished over the past 100 years, some of our big moments and milestones. But we can't do that without recognizing DAV's founder, World War I disabled Army veteran, Judge Robert Marks. And so we'll have an entire podcast dedicated to talking about his life and legacy. So I'm very excited for that podcast.
And what a fascinating life he lived. I'm looking forward to that one as always. And if you missed any of our podcasts, a lot of good ones back there. You can get any of it anytime. DAV.org/podcast, a place to do so. And of course, subscribe, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and anywhere you listen. For Ashley Burns and all of us here at DAV, I'm Dan Klaskins. We'll see you next time right here on the DAV Podcast.